Welcome once again to another TMG interview. I'm Paul Preston, joined by fellow movie guy and film review MVP at the website, themovieguys.net, Ray Scalacci, and we're celebrating the glorious return of an author and a Hollywood guy who has successfully worked in multiple realms of the entertainment universe: Universal, 20th Century Fox, Paramount, Disney, TriStar, Orion, HBO. You heard me, he's outlasted some of these studios themselves. So, and last time he was with us, he was promoting a book that took place in the seedy side of Hollywood. And it turns out you could tell a lot of stories in that realm. So he's back with another seedy Hollywood story. Last time he was here for Someone to Watch Over Me. Now he is here to talk to us about Shout at the Devil, now available at Amazon. Please welcome Dan Bronson.
Hey, Dan.
Hey, good to see you guys.
Good to see you.
Well, let's get right to the return of Hollywood fixer Jack Shannon, who is your star in the last book you wrote, and he returns here. So when we last left him, he had to baby these movie stars, and he got involved in a murder mystery with the gorgeous Savannah Stevens. What is Jack up to now?
Well, Jack's in exile as a result of what he did in the first book. He's been blacklisted by every major studio in town, and he's working on Poverty Row as a stuntman and extra. And a beautiful star, figure out of his own past, comes to him and asks for his help in coping with a blackmail attempt, which he does, only to end up the prime suspect in the murder of the blackmailer.
And this involves, if I'm not mistaken, stag film? From Ray, I should say to our listeners, Ray wrote a review of the book, so you can go to the Movie Guys and read that review. And I did that very thing. And but boy, these were the days when a stag film could end your career. Now they start careers, right?
Yeah, now they start careers.
Absolutely. The rumor is that Joan Crawford made one, and that the studio bought up every copy of it in order to suppress it, to keep from ending her career, but also to control her. Uh, every star in Hollywood had a morality clause, and they could invoke it if it turns out the star was losing their star power, and they felt they were wasting their money on them. They could use it to break the contract, and that's the situation here. Karen Karen Scott is a major star. Well, backing up a little bit, if you have read the first book, you know that Jack co-starred with her in a movie called Bridger's Gap, and it was a huge success. It launched her into a star career. Unfortunately, World War II broke out at the same moment. Jack volunteered. He saw D-Day, the Battle of the Bulge, the freeing of the death camps, came back physically and emotionally scarred. It's a scar that runs all the way across his cheek. End of his career as an actor. Studio takes pity on him, makes him a publicist, and that's the role that he played in the first book. His determination to do right in this totally corrupt Hollywood world ended up in his blacklisting, and is now working for Poverty Row. He's actually in danger of losing his house because the work is drying up. So when Karen comes to him and offers him a lot of money to help her out, to use his expertise as a publicist in dealing with this blackmailer, he jumps at the chance.
Now, this takes place back in the 50s. You want to explain, because for people that are not baby boomers, they may not realize what Poverty Row was. Maybe you want to explain that a little bit?
I honestly was going to ask that too, because it's not. I was like, oh, Skid Row, like in downtown LA, but no, he's
No,
working at
no.
Poverty Row. So what is it? Yeah, good
It's
question.
Hollywood's version of Skid Row.
Yeah.
Actually, it's the Sunset Gower area was considered Poverty Row. There were a lot of mini studios. Some of them appeared and disappeared in the flash of an eye. The only one to emerge ultimately as a major was Columbia Studios, which was still located there during its prime years. But they cranked out these movies in 5 or 6 days. They made them on minuscule budgets. The majors would get 5 or 6 weeks. They get 5 or 6 days. Uh, the majors get a lot of money. They have almost nothing. They're doing it with smoke and mirrors. Uh, they cast out of the Columbia drugstore right across the street, where all of these drugstore cowboys hang out. That's where the drugstore cowboy phrase came from. And that's basically what Jack is at this point in time, a drugstore cowboy. You wait around for the casting director, the producer, usually now there's no casting director, comes by and says, I want you, you, and you. And they bus you off to a location somewhere and you get some work for the day. That's where he is now. Very, very different from Titanic Pictures and his role as a major publicist there.
I gotta say, in Ray's review, he refers to Karen Scott as a powerful presence. Karen is only 5'1", but she's strong-minded and feisty. You've just described my fiance. So so if you ever make the film, I gotta tell her to audition. But how does Jack do? Is because now, I mean, we refer to him as a fixer, as a publicist. I mean, he was a former actor. So how does he fare as a detective?
He's kind of an accidental detective, am I right?
Well, there's a
Yes, which
title.
is a great phrase. That's it. He was an accidental detective in the first one, but he really is here. I mean, this with a vengeance. Uh, I couldn't have said it better. Yeah, yeah.
Would Ray's also compared Jack to Ray Donovan? Would you think that's accurate? Kind of.
Well, frankly, I've never seen Ray Donovan. I
Oh,
know
okay.
about it, of course. I've deliberately never watched it because they're both fixers, but they're fixers in very different points in time. This was I chose to set this in the late 40s and early 50s, this series, uh, because that's when the studios were at their peak of power and were just about to lose it all. I'm anticipating, in fact, a third book. Notice the cover of the first book was blue. Uh, get the same imagery in the second book. It's charcoal, shades of gray. The third one will be red because it's going to deal with the Red Scare and the collapse of the studio system. I think it's a period of huge change, and change is drama. So that's how I happen to set it there. The whole thing fell apart with the Paramount consent decrees when the studios lost their distribution system. They also lost their power over the stars who refused to sign contracts and went out and made deals on their own at various studios. And then there was the challenge of TV. So it was all falling apart very early in the 50s. This is 1951. The next one will probably be 53. Doing a little
Oh,
research
okay.
on it now.
How many Jack Shannon novels can you imagine writing? I mean, it's an endless.
Not more than three.
Oh, not more
Uh,
than three. It's a trilogy.
there's more to explore in his character. I mean, one of the things that we learn this time, rather late in the book, is how he got his scar, which is a very, very important element of his character. Uh, there are a few other things I'd like to explore, a few other things I'd like to reveal. I th- I think if you look at the great contemporary mystery novels, the kind of things that Michael Conley and let's see, uh, Devil in a Blue Dress, blanking out on his name right now. Their
Uh,
first books.
Denzel Washington. Sorry, I know the movie. I'm a movie
Yeah.
guy.
Well, I was actually thinking Walter Mosley, who wrote the book,
Oh, yes.
movie
Charles Burnett. Did
space.
he make the film? Is that right? Okay. Anyway,
Yeah,
go ahead.
yeah.
I think
Great film. I thought it was a terrific film.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you look at their careers, they're expected to write at least a novel a year. And I think that's going back to the well too quickly and too often. Um, the well needs to have time to fill up. Uh, the interesting thing for me is that both Connolly and Mosley, in my opinion, did their best work in their first 5 or 6 novels. Um, I think that Connolly's best is The Concrete Blonde. Uh, Walter Mosley, uh, A Little Yellow Dog is probably the best, but though I love Devil in a Blue Dress. At any rate, they go back again and again and again, and it's hard to discover new aspects of the characters. And then, well, one of the things that happened for Conley is he came up with a new character, I'm calling the limousine detective. That's not what he is. Uh, Made a movie out of that, a
Oh,
very good
the Lincoln
Matthew
lawyer. Yeah.
McConaughey. Um, and suddenly he was writing at the same level that he started at uh, way back with Black Echo. Uh, Same kind of thing with a lot of the writers. As soon as they take off with a new character, uh, they're still doing their series character, their initial series character, but the new character brings a
New life.
lot of new vibrancy and vigor to their work. Well, I don't want to get into that pattern, and I don't know that there's any publisher banging on my door to uh, to ask me to do it. But I might be convinced to listen if it happened.
Well, here's the thing, Dan. If you were to get say, a Netflix or some kind of deal like that where they wanted to expound on the character, it would be kind of like, say, remember Hammett's The Thin Man? And
Hmm.
Hammett only wrote one book, The Thin Man. And with later, it was someone else who wrote the screenplays for the other Thin Man movies, and they were all very, very successful.
Oh,
So,
they're terrific. I've seen them all many times.
yeah,
I
yes.
love them.
So, yeah,
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what happened with Conley with the first Bosch series, which is Dynamite. It's a wonderful, wonderful uh, series of streamers. Um, he wrote a few of them, but they were all based upon his work. Uh, but he had a crew of executive producer writers uh, doing the work for him. One of whom sat next to me in creative writing at Pomona College 100 years ago.
oh,
Jeff
wow.
Fiskin. Hated him. He was so good, and I was so bad. And he looked like a writer. He had the beard, and he had the attitude, and uh, he turned out to be a major writer. I got back in touch with him after Someone to Watch Over Me came out, and Jeff, who likes nothing, actually liked Someone to Watch Over Me. So I was
Yeah.
really kind of thrilled about that. But you're right, that's generally what happens. So Netflix, if you're listening, I'm certainly open to an
Ah,
offer.
well, something I need to say about Dan's book, and that is from the moment I started reading, because I was going through a lot of stuff at the time that he called me up and said, "Hey, do you want to read this sequel of sorts?" And I said, "Sure," but I, I hesitant to pick it up because I had so much on my mind, and I pick it up, and the very first sentence captures me. Dan, do you mind me saying the very
Oh
first?
no, absolutely.
I died 3 times that day. And I went, okay, that's it. I'm sucked in. It just it urged me to get into the whole story, into Jack's whole story again. Um, and the way Dan will turn around it's not just the mystery. It's all the little settings that he puts, all the little decorations behind the scenes. He explains in that first chapter how he or Jack, I guess the both of you, are talking about the film Charge of Light Brigade, and they're describing it. And if you haven't seen the film, you're reading this and going, "I've got to see this film," because he makes it that exciting. And then to top it off, he doesn't just end with that. He goes into how Errol Flynn, who was a giant star at the time, who was in the movie, how Errol Flynn was so angry that the horses got hurt in the movie that he went over and got physical with the director and then went to the American Humane Society over it. That's that's just incredible.
Well,
Well,
thank you. Thank you very much. That first line has gotten a lot of attention. The Southern California chapter of the Mystery Writers of America has this journal that they publish each month, and it always ends with the last word. Uh, the editor chooses a single sentence by one of the members who include Michael Connelly and just about every other major mystery writer in America. They all seem to live in our part of the world. Uh, and they chose just before my book came out, I died 3 times that day as the last word. Uh, so I was really thrilled about that kind of recognition.
Yeah. It's really it captures the reader immediately.
Well,
And
it's not my favorite novel. I'm not my favorite line in the novel. My my favorite line is one that you may not even remember, but it's and so I did. You have to get to the moment when that line occurs to
uh-huh.
understand why, but it's actually one of the best love scenes I've ever written in a single sentence.
Well, I have to. You have some great lines in there. One of my favorite lines from Jack is when he says, "Like everyone in Hollywood, I lied for a living." And I thought, wow, that nails it. So I was, yeah.
It comes pretty close to the truth, unfortunately.
Well, if we
It's
if we start imagining Jack Shannon audibly and visually, I mean, say Netflix calls. Do you want to say like who could play Jack Shannon, or do you want to continue to leave that up for the listener or the reader right now to fill that in?
yeah, Robert Mitchum was one of the great stars, late
Oh
40s,
yeah.
50s, 60s on up,
Oh,
and
that'd be great.
he'd be to me he'd be the perfect guy. Um, I've I don't know. There's so many up and comers now. I'm not even familiar with all of them. I've kind of lost back there in the 50s, so that gives you a sense of the sort of actor I'd love to see in it.
I I have to tell you, Dan, are you familiar with the actor Michael Madsen?
Yeah.
I always thought he was a Robert Mitchum type.
Hmm.
And I had looked so forward to everything he did, and then his career didn't go well.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. And now he's too old for the part.
yeah, yeah.
I could see him with the scar. That'd be cool.
Yeah. Well, and it takes
And cool.
an actor who's courageous enough to have a scar. Uh,
Mhm.
Mitchum wouldn't give a damn. He just he wouldn't give a shit. Okay, I'll have a scar. Uh, uh, he's he's the guy who I think is the very incarnation of Jack Shannon.
Was there ever an audiobook? I never looked back to find out if there was one for the previous book
Oh,
and if there's one coming
Oh
out.
yeah, as a matter of fact, that's kind of an interesting story. Um, I I wasn't happy with any of the people who were available from the publisher, so I got on the phone to a friend who put me in touch with Matthew Arkin, who now teaches voiceover and related kinds of acting at Chapman University. And
Oh.
Matthew was good enough to give me some suggestions. And one of them was a fellow by the name of Jack Daniel. And I said, yes!
Oh,
As soon as
yeah.
it's Jack Shannon's favorite drink. I mean,
yeah.
and it turns out he's quite wonderful. He's been the voice of BMW. He's done a bunch of movie trailers. Uh, he's really excellent. And here's something. It's kind of a commentary on the contemporary publishing situation. Uh, the audiobook version of Someone to Watch Over Me sold more copies than the paperback, the hardback, and the Kindle put together.
Wow.
Uh, People don't read the way they used to, but
Yeah.
they have to fill lots of empty hours in their cars
Yep.
driving to work in the morning and coming home in the evening. And I'm afraid the audiobook is the future. Me, I love to have the print in front of me. I love to go back and look at things. But yeah, I've gotten a lot of compliments on that audiobook, and he Jack did it again for Shot at the Devil.
Oh,
I'm thrilled to find that out because I interviewed Jack right in the pages here of themovieguys.net. So he's great. That's a great get. I wasn't aware you two those paths have crossed. So that's
Yeah,
fantastic.
absolutely. He's in love with the voice of Jack Shannon. The voice is the key to the whole character, as far as I'm concerned. And I couldn't start the novel until I'd gotten the voice, just as I couldn't do the sequel until I'd regained the voice. Um, yeah, you ought to have a chat with him again. He and I worked very closely together on uh, on the audiobook, and it it neared bestseller. Well, the first Jack Shannon, we were right alongside a couple of Raymond Chandlers in our book sales, audio book sales for a week or so. We didn't quite get to the top one, and I think we got to 108 this time in noir on Audible, but that's a pretty big deal. So yeah, give me a call and have another chat with
Talk
him.
to
He's
him
a
again.
very interesting guy.
Yeah, well, I mean, he got them. I have the stats here from the audition for the voiceover for your book. Looks like he beat out James Beam and Jonathan Walker. So Johnny Walker and Jim Beam almost got the job, but it went to Jack Daniel. So that's either way. Jack Shannon would have been thrilled with either of those
Yeah,
people
yeah, I think
playing
so.
it. You ever consider returning to screenwriting? I should remind everyone you wrote The Last Innocent Man, which starred Ed Harris, and The Death of a Cheerleader. Any return to script writing? Or you into the novels now, and that's your vibe?
Well, it's very difficult to revive a career in Hollywood. I I would consider it if the opportunity presented itself because I love the form. One of the things I love about it is the rigidity of it. It's like a sonnet. There are all kinds of things that you have to have there, like the three act structure and the fact that you can't enter the minds of any of the characters. You can't comment on the characters. You have to find ways to make these things work for you rather than against you. And I do think that my background as a screenwriter has heavily influenced what I've done as a novelist. It's certainly given me the visual element of my work. I think it's highly visual. The emphasis on dialogue, uh, making every character count. You know, I don't know. Even with great novelists, you find that they introduce characters who are simply names. They need them to get from point A to point B or C, but they don't really give them any character. I like to think that every one of my characters has character, and every one of them has a voice. And right now, I'm going to go get rid of that sunlight that's
Yeah,
hitting me. I'm
I
down
have
in
to
my
admit,
study.
it
It's,
did give you a film noir vibe that your novel reflects. So that was kind of cool.
yeah. Now I can see myself. Okay.
Last time, and again, I encourage everyone to go listen to our previous interview with Dan about the previous book, and then it's split into two parts because the second part was just all sorts of Hollywood talk and about everybody he's met, and so I don't want to rehash all of that, but it feels right today to ask if your path ever crossed with Gene Hackman.
No.
No.
Well, I did recommend a movie that we ultimately made at Paramount. I'm blanking out on the name of it now. Darn it. That he starred in, but I never met the man himself. No.
No. Yeah.
No, that's very, I wanted to
Well, that's
explain
still,
more.
any kind of connection, because all our stories previously, I don't know if you met everyone involved with every, I don't know if you met Bruce Willis or whatever, but I know you worked on.
Oh, yeah.
Very much.
I
Okay,
spent a lot of
Don't
time
go
with
there.
Bruce.
oh, that's right. Oh, well, never mind.
Yeah. I think the most interesting thing about him is if you could get him one-on-one, he was he was very bright, very serious about his career, what he wanted to do, what he wanted to accomplish. The instant another person entered the room, he became the character he played on Moonlighting, kind of
Uh,
sass and jokey and uh, very, very interesting.
well, we also previously talked about your favorite movie of all time, which you said was Godfather 1 and 2 combined, which is great. Not necessarily the saga, but the two films are tough to stand apart when you talk about the greatest movies ever. So I won't ask you that question again, but I will ask you, since you've written noirish novels, what is your favorite film noir of all time?
Chinatown.
Oh, yeah,
As a
yeah.
matter
Wow.
of fact, we, I, I got, I got a lot of attention on this new book, and a lot of it came from NoirCon. I don't know if you've even heard of it, but it's the equivalent of ComCon for fans and writers of dark mysteries. And they had a big convention down in Palm Springs the week after my book came out, and they actually excerpted the first two chapters of my book in their journal. Then they printed an interview that Stephen Galloway, formerly exec editor of The Hollywood Reporter, did with me about my book. Then they invited me to read at Noir at the bar, where I got the most enthusiastic reception alongside a couple of pretty well-known writers. And I opened the whole convention and this takes us back to Chinatown. They opened the convention with a screening of Chinatown and asked me to do the intro and the commentary on it. And
Oh,
I got a really nice response to that. Yeah, Chinatown is without doubt my favorite of the film noirs. And ironically enough, it's sort of post-noir, late noir. It doesn't come out of that classic post-war period where these extraordinary B movies were very often masterpieces. But yeah, that would be it. Nicholson's performance is, I think, the best he ever gave. Uh, it's just an extraordinary film in every way. Matter of fact, I found out have you read the Big Nowhere about the making of Chinatown?
No.
no.
Oh, it's a fascinating book. When I first came to Hollywood, I was apprenticed to Gil Cates over at Universal on a not very good movie called The Last Married Couple in America. John Herman Shaner, who wrote The Last Married Couple in America, kind of took a liking to me. He wrote Nicholson's Going South, and a
Oh.
number of other films. At any rate, it turns out that he and Jack Nicholson and Robert Towne were roommates during their time at Roger Corman's studio, which is where all of them, and it was the best film school in the world. Uh, at any rate, he told me that there was actually a fourth fellow, and that he was the most brilliant of them all, but he was the only one who never broke through in a big way. And I always wonder what happened to the fourth guy. Uh, well, I read The Big Nowhere and I found out. Turns out the fourth guy was Robert Towne's roommate at Pomona College, where they had, incidentally, the same creative writing instruction that Jeff Fiskin and I had. And that he was more than just Robert Towne's editor, he was his collaborator. Uh, Towne would go to him every time he ran into a problem. And this is true of virtually everything that he ever wrote, including Chinatown. Uh, so it turns out there were not just, well, there were three authors of Chinatown. There was, of course, Towne himself. There was Roman Polanski, who made some fascinating changes. As a matter of fact, I've got a copy of the script, and one of them was coming up. I believe he was the one who came up with the name Noah Cross, which is one of the great character names in the whole history of film and literature. Uh, but the third, and of course it was Polanski who wrote the ending uh, over Towne's objection, and it was Polanski who decided to tell the whole thing from the point of view of the Jack Nicholson character. But there was this third guy, and up until the publication of The Big Nowhere, he was totally unknown.
Wow.
Uh, Fascinating story.
Ooh, there
That's
might be a whole mystery in there about what happened to that guy.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
There's
yeah.
your fourth book. Yeah. Yeah, that movie I saw it way too young, and Network and movies like it, because I loved Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I just said I want to watch all the movies. So I'm young and I'm watching Network and Chinatown, and it's just going right over my head. I've revisited them later. I watched Chinatown during the lockdown. I said, okay, I got it's time to watch these movies I saw too young, and of course I loved it. And they just showed it at the beautiful theater at the Academy Museum recently as
Hmm.
well. And so that was just a fantastic screening. A
Oh, yeah.
big,
I
beautiful.
hadn't looked at it in at least 10 years. I don't know how many times I've seen it. I love the thing, but it holds up so beautifully. I, yeah, it's the quintessential classic film noir as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, so
It-
those time period movies hold up well with great filmmakers, of course, but like 74, I think it came out, right? But it takes place in the 30s, so it still looks great.
right.
Movies that took
Oh,
place in 1974, ooh, they look dated.
yeah, that would have been a different. Well, that's one of the reasons that I'm back in the 50s. Uh, it's to me a much more interesting period of time than the corporate Hollywood that we live in today. Uh, the other thing is, I wouldn't want to write a mystery set today. And we got DNA, we got cameras everywhere. How do you get away with anything? You get away with it in court. By suppressing evidence, and but I I really wouldn't find it nearly as much fun as it was back then.
Yeah, yeah. The one thing you forget to mention about Chinatown is Faye Dunaway.
Oh,
She was
yeah,
the ultimate femme fatale.
yeah. Uh, Her best performance. She was unhappy most of the time. You got to read this book, The Big Nowhere. Uh, you'll find out an awful lot of things you didn't know, and maybe you don't want to know, but they
I know
talk
she
about
didn't get
the
along with
clapping
Polanski.
scene and how that came to be, and it's a really interesting book.
I know that she didn't get along with Polanski very well.
No, no. Uh, but she ended up giving her best performance.
Reading reading Shut at the Devil, I'm reading it and I'm thinking, okay, this baby boomers and earlier can really relate to everything that's going on in this book, which is great. But it's such a great mystery novel that's laced with incredible tawdriness of the entertainment industry and the City of Angels. I just find it a must read for anybody that likes that kind of thing. So
Well,
it's
thank you. I think Hollywood is probably the best natural setting for a noir mystery. I mean, uh, what are the characteristics of noir? A flawed individual is trying to do the right thing in a totally corrupt world where nothing is what it seems to be and no one is who they appear to be. Uh, it's a classic theme. Uh, it certainly goes back to Shakespeare. A man can smile and be a villain. Uh, many, all that glisters is not gold. It's something that great writers have dealt with. Heart of Darkness, again and again and again. Things are not what they seem, and that's the quintessence of Hollywood.
yeah.
So I can't imagine a better place to set a noir story.
Did you see Babylon? And if so, what did you think? Because that's set 30 years earlier, but that movie was certainly reveled in the
Yes.
excess of nasty Hollywood.
I hated it.
Yeah, that movie does not fall in anybody's middle.
I know. And I loved it.
No,
So
I from the first moments, I was out of there. I mean, I can't remember if I even managed to finish it. I really detested
It
it.
is over the top. Yeah, it is the anti-La La Land, which is one of my favorite movies of
yes,
all time.
yeah.
Made by the
Maybe
same
that's
guy.
why I
It's
loved
just
it so
crazy.
much.
Oh, that's right. That's where Ray and I disagree. Yeah, I love me some La La Land.
Oh,
Listen, if you don't love La La Land, that's only because you don't like life, love, art, music, and movies. But Ray, do your thing. That's all.
have you ever seen The Umbrellas of Cherbourg?
Yes. That's
No, no, and
that
I know why. I know how I should. It's coming to Vidiots, I think, or one of the.
that's
It's coming to one of the retro houses here in town.
and
You should
that
see
is why I have my issue with La La Land is
Yeah,
because of that movie.
exactly. I mean, it's as far as I'm concerned, it's an inept ripoff of one of the greatest movies ever made.
Yeah, I've
Yes.
heard that about some
I really,
umbrellas.
I'd love to hear what you think after you've had a chance to see it.
Yeah, I look. There's so many movies. It's
That's
so
why
many
you're a
movies,
movie guy.
but I want to see them all, and I can't. All right. Well, tell us, Dan, where we can find you online, your website, social plugs, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I got dan-bronson.com. Uh, it's got a bio. It's got all three books with synopses and reviews. It's got links to all of the interviews and podcasts and that kind of thing that I've been involved in. Uh, I have another one, an older one, uh, which I developed for my memoir, Confessions of a Hollywood Nobody. That's Hollywood-nobody.com. And it's kind of fun and funny, like the book, which is a fun, funny survivor's guide to Hollywood. And I'm really proud of that one because there's a lot of comic stuff in it that it reveals the other side of me. Things are pretty dark in the novels that I write, though I like to think there's a humorous component. But the two websites, well, the one is dead serious, and the other one is not to be taken seriously.
Yeah, and if you want a little primer on that, we did talk about it in our previous interview. So again, hit themovieguys.net for our past interviews with Dan. We hope you enjoyed this one, and then Shout at the Devil available now on Amazon. I imagine everywhere else you can find books, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Nowadays. And as ever, you can find everything we're up to, including reviews, articles, and more interviews like this at themovieguys.net. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Movie Guys!